Welcome to Going Deep, the RSP cast with Brandon Angelo and Matt Waldman. We get to do this every other week, and it's such a pleasure to be able to join you. We've got a couple of fun
Absolutely.
topics, don't we, Brandon?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that time of year, got the holidays, and we have games Saturday, Sunday, Monday, so it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, man, it's going to be great. And, one other thing, if you are an RSP subscriber in the past, you know about this. If you haven't subscribed to the RSP, this is really a perfect time to do so because I do a pre order discount for the April 1 pre draft guide, and you also get a post draft guide with it 1 week after the NFL draft. That I've been doing for 19 years. You can find it at mattwaldman.com, and you can learn more about it there. But it's available for $19.95. You're going to get probably between 900 to 1,000 pages of content with the
Worth
RSP.
every page too. I'll tell you that much.
I appreciate that, and it's certainly the best thing I do in this space in terms of what I try to offer as a content provider. And
Absolutely.
so if you want to learn more about it and the scouting reports that I get, there's videos where you can take a tour. You can look at some sample scouting reports, at my site, mattwaldmanrsp.com. I know I have two sites. I have kind of a low overhead operation, we'll put it that way. Eventually I'll be combining the two sites, the sales site with the WordPress site that I have down the line, and
Yep.
getting that together. But hasn't stopped people from, being able to access it easily and be able to enjoy the product that it is. And of course, if you are one of the regular subscribers, I know you're waiting for the 22nd. That's the day that the pre-order ended, will be ending, and you can begin ordering at full price, which is only $2 more, $21.95 for both products. I also offer a projections and rankings product that is for dynasty rankings and projections. That's available for $24.95. They really go well together. You kind of tie the two, the data and the scouting reports. So, if you're looking more for like reports on the everything about the player that will help with your waiver wire and knowing for long term what these players can offer, then the pre-draft, post-draft is your ticket. If you're just looking for, I want answers, I don't need much explanation as to why. I just want to know where you rank all dynasty players, including rookies. But I don't need to know why they're good or not. I just want to know what the trend is right now. Then you can get that, and that's updated multiple times during the year. It starts in June, and then I give a June update, twice in August, usually September, and then once a month. But the projections are summer, and then the rankings are throughout, multiple times throughout the year until December, and then I give you one more in June to say, hey, remember this, and then if you want to reorder, you can reorder for that next year. So,
Love it.
yeah. So, listen, one of the things that you brought up this week was that you have some ideas on there's parallels between these players, and it's there you can see some of what you're gonna some of the players you mentioned here. You can see some parallels off on the surface, but I know it goes deeper than this, and especially as you really think about it. Lamar Jackson, James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Christian McCaffrey. So tell me, why you were thinking like, listen, Matt, I've got a good one here that we need to talk about.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I actually didn't bring this up. One of my good friends, longtime friends, who's a really, really avid football watcher like I am, shot me a text and was like, "What do you think about this?" And it was a video of like Lamar Jackson. He was just and someone commented like, "Why is it like Lamar Jackson's always running 80%?" Like, oh my god, this is incredible. And I watched Lamar, and I was watching the Lions game, and I saw the same commonalities that I saw with Lamar Jackson. And I saw question with James Cook
Thank you.
too in Buffalo when he did in that Cowboys game. That I'm watching Christian McCaffrey. And the one thing those guys all have in common, you can tie them together, is how well they control the pace of their own game. And that is one of the biggest signs of high-level cognitive athletes, right? So we're looking at athletes who can control space and time, but also know how to control their own gears on a given play. Like Lamar Jackson never reaches top gear, right? He's like the polar opposite of like Isaiah Pacheco, who's
Right.
only running 100 miles an hour, but that's all you get 0 or 100,
Yeah.
right? With a guy like Pacheco. With like Lamar, you're getting that what do I need to do on a given down to be successful, right? I'm seeing that type of high level ball with James Cook. And it's really hard to tackle those guys and corral them in space because they're moving at a different pace on every single play, right? And that's the big thing. That's why Christian McCaffrey is so successful,
Yes.
right? He's not overly big. He's not blazingly fast. He's a very fast guy, but he's not Chris Johnson, right? But what he can do is control pace and the tempo of his runs to set up blocks and get the defender's angle, get an advantage on the defender's angle, and do that down to down because he's trying to make the given play successful. And the one thing these guys do really well is, I was thinking of the last time I saw Lamar Jackson just get lit up. I can't remember.
No.
I cannot remember the last time I saw Lamar Jackson get lit up. I was watching Jahmyr Gibbs too, and he played a great game. He's slipping and sliding out of tackles, and one thing I noticed with Gibbs too is if it wasn't really there, he's protected himself and went down and got 3 yards. And he's okay doing that. Young players a lot of times are not okay making that step. They want to break the big run every time. I heard Robert Saleh actually making that come with Breece Hall. That's why James' brother Dalvin is getting more work in New York because Breece Hall trying to hit the home run every time. Right? It's either you're getting a home run or you're striking out. He's like that old baseball player who's hitting 198, but he has 20 home runs.
Yeah.
Right? It's great when it works, but a lot of times you have to control the tempo of your own run and get what's blocked. Or in the case of like Lamar Jackson, like you're the field judge. So you're dictating the pace, the tempo, the flow of the game. You're trying to get 4 or 5, not trying to make that risk and get 15, 20, but you might get -3 on that, right? And put yourself behind from a down and distance standpoint. And those guys are becoming those guys are becoming the engines of their own offense. McCaffrey's already the engine of the 49ers. I'm seeing that same commonality with Cook and Jahmyr Gibbs, is they're becoming the engine of their own offense. If you watch the Detroit Lions, if you watch them play, they're much more successful with Jahmyr Gibbs on the field, not because Jahmyr Gibbs is so much better of a player than Dave Montgomery, but defenses have to think a lot more when Jahmyr Gibbs is out. The range of outcomes is much more fast, right? Dave Montgomery very rarely will break a 25-plus yard run. Right? Jahmyr Gibbs leading the league in 20-plus yard runs. So there's a big difference there, but it's really a big difference of being on your toes and doing a lot more, dynamically in terms of scheme. But I thought those were really interesting parallel from a pace, tempo, and just an overall like movement intellect standpoint when you talk about those guys. How will they pair together?
I love this topic because it is a great parallel, and it also extends to not just about it. Pace is a great way of describing it, but it's not just them controlling their own pace, but it's also being able to gauge the pace of others. And it's a marriage between the two, because when you watch Lamar Jackson, I think it was Darius Butler did some analysis that Greg Cosell retweeted this week about Lamar Jackson's really improving from the pocket. And I thought to myself, well, no offense to Darius Butler, he's probably been playing and may not have noticed and not have studied Lamar on that level, and maybe knew as an analyst as well. But that's bullshit. Lamar Jackson has always been great from the pocket, and scouts have noticed that who didn't conclude that or write him off as a wide receiver playing the quarterback position. They
Right.
knew that a long time ago. And one of the reasons he was great in the pocket is that he could stand in there in far tighter confines than what Butler was even showing in the games, in the highlights that he was doing. And I'm not banging on Butler's analysis. It was smart analysis on what he did. It was just kind of, there was an inadvertent historical revisionist attitude about Jackson, because when you watch him, he could play in the tightest of pockets and be comfortable. Whereas we've talked about Kyler Murray, and when somebody gets within 3 yards of him, he
Right.
runs as if a bomb has blown up in the
Right.
pocket. Lamar Jackson could have a bomb blow up in the pocket, and I would bet he would be one of the few quarterbacks that would be able to dodge the shrapnel and still throw the ball downfield. I mean,
Right.
that's
100%.
so. And when you look at McCaffrey or Cook, it's the same thing. I'm still, while you were talking, I was literally looking up where I could find something on Twitter of a run that I showed of Cook at Georgia. That was the one that really intrigued me, because it explained, or it visually illustrated similar thoughts about what you were saying. Is that
Right.
his feet? Because I wrote, here it was. It's a video that has him against Tennessee, where I'm showing his curvilinear skills and feel for tight confines. Is that his ability to really understand and gauge, where defenders are and where they aren't, and to integrate that into his own skill set. People who, and I think that's the point I want to make, is that all these players you mentioned, all of them can survey the situation around them and have a great gauge for, in relation to what defenders are doing within the scope of the play, and how they can leverage their skills, how much
Yeah.
or how little. And
Right.
they know their boundaries and their body well enough to be able to do that. That's why, like, a good example of that, of a quarterback who might have been able to do it if he studied the game, was Johnny Manziel. Like,
Yeah.
Johnny Manziel had that in college. He had it in spades in college. But in the pros, he was going to need, like, more time and effort to really be a student of, like, what can I get away with, what I can't. Because you see it.
Yeah.
You see it how, like, when usually with quarterbacks, you see it when, like, a 325 to 350 pound DT runs them down as they break
Yeah.
a pocket. That's that learning moment for them to go, okay, this is what I used to be able to do. I can no longer do that. And who learns from it? And I think that the guys you mentioned, that's that interplay for them, is their body awareness, their awareness of what's going around them, and the ability to really just adjust and know their game, the way, like, Ali used to sit on the ropes and let people try and tire themselves
Yeah.
out.
No,
And
for sure.
he would totally, but I'm sure that he had to, there were times probably in his training camp, where he's getting busted up by some boxers, some good
Yeah.
pros, until he figured out what I can and can't do that I was able to do when I was younger.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times it's constraints versus no constraints, right?
Yeah.
So it's like structure versus lack of structure, right? So, like, for a guy like Lamar Jackson, people thought he was very good with no structure, which is true. People thought, well, he's not very good when there is structure, which is false. Very good when there's structure. So with guys like that, you learn that they're so good without structure that they don't need structure. It's not that they're not good in structure; they don't need it to succeed.
Yeah.
But a lot of people need structure in their daily lives, right, or in their jobs to have a ton of success. But you see all these guys, and they're all so good in the structure of a given play because they understand the bandwidth of what the play can give them.
Yeah.
Not every play in the NFL is going to score a touchdown. Not every play is going to get 15 yards. They know what they can get based on their own capabilities, based on what's blocked them, based on what the defense is, how the defense is playing them. And also, too,
that's curvilinear move,
especially for these guys, how they're being tackled, right?
Yeah.
How they're being contacted, high, low, direct, indirect. I'll need to kind of manage those contact types, not get hurt, and live and fight another down. Because that's really the most important thing, for guys that get hit 200 times a year. It's being able to understand different contact types, how to manage them, how to negate them, and how to deliver punishment if they need to.
Yeah, and I love how you brought up Breece Hall, because Breece Hall, to me, you can see that with a better line, even without the skills you're mentioning, he's going to be a big time yardage producer. I think
for sure.
It's going to be scary. But when you watch him play, and you're one of the few people I can have this conversation with, and I know you're going to get exactly what I'm talking about. He runs. What makes him so awesome, but at the same time, like why coaches are probably have Dalvin Cook getting a little more time, is that he runs one disaster at a time. Like he averts
Sure.
one disaster at a time.
Sure.
Like you know how like you watch someone and they're like I'm going to take on what's in front of me at the moment, and he processes that extremely fast. But it's in a way where he's not maybe seen 2 steps ahead, or he's not seen it in the full scope as what you've talked about with these other players. So he's one of those guys that when you watch him, you go, wow, the fact that he's just literally going, okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And he can get 8 yards on that play is incredible, but it's not optimal for what he could be.
Sure.
Yeah. And that makes it all the more fascinating. I'm going to share this and see if I can just, I'm going to share the screen with, I found this tape of him. All right. Of Cook. And it was just this play from Tennessee. It was like one of the first plays I saw. And I'm going to see if I can find it like all the way through, because I stop it a lot explaining stuff. But you'll see that you've got 2 pullers right here. And just see how he's like, the penetration that's in that backfield for him to be able to work through that and then avoid 24 and dip around. And you just see, it's a perfect...
Go back.
I will.
So what makes this really unique and makes it so hard to defend, and why he's becoming a really high-level football player, just play it. I'll tell you when to stop.
Okay.
Now, so can you see my cursor or no? You probably can't. If you can't, it's fine.
It's okay.
So look at Cook's face mask. Look at where his left knee is pointing.
Yeah.
So when 33 and 24 are coming downhill here, they have a sight. Right? Everybody's a sight line as a defender. Usually it's a sight line if you're trying to make a tackle, right? From a movement standpoint, you're looking at someone from a linear fashion. So you think that this person is going to come directly at you because that's where their hips are going. So James Cook, eyes, hips, shoulders, all there. So his opportunity is going linear. But what he does is he's able to play it.
Yeah, we're going to wait for me to finish talking and get it through it. It's probably going to go through.
No, it's fine. So what he's able to do is he's literally able, look at where his legs are.
Yeah.
He's able to bend path quicker than the defender can make a decision of where he's going.
Yeah.
That's the really unique part about the game, and why this wouldn't be possible if James Cook was 210 pounds, 205 pounds. These are the type of maneuvers that are only possible with smaller. And why these type of players are getting so much more playing time in shorter down and distances, because this type of movement isn't possible with your 205 plus pound guys. You can't move that quickly with that much flexibility in that lower half to then produce force getting upfield. That is impossible to do. And also not fall.
Yeah.
Like, look at where his ankles are. And if
Yeah.
you play it, he's still getting 5-6 plus yards after this.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. Like, I mean, this is probably one of if you look at this play, this is one of those plays when you circle this and you ask how many can do this.
Yeah.
And the answer is, I can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
Not very many.
Yeah, exactly. And when you see, like, as he takes the exchange, I mean, there's literally 2 unblocked defenders off the edge. If you're just listening to this, this will be on YouTube, but 2 unblocked defenders off the edge and penetration into where the puller is, who's basically stifled the first puller on this play, and he's just taking the ball from Stetson Bennett. In fact, he doesn't even have his hands on the ball. The ball's in his chest with
Right.
Stetson Bennett's grip on him, and that's what he's facing. And then after he takes the exchange, he takes one step, and he's basically on the outside hip of his backside puller, and is able to make a quick little turn with his hips so that he can split the front side, or he was on the front side hip of his puller, with a unblocked defender coming to the outside shoulder of that puller unblocked.
Right.
He's able to split the inside hip of that puller and a defender who just came off a missed block, and he makes that both defenders miss.
Yeah.
And it's literally like he ran through a phone booth with 2 people reaching for him, and I think literally the lit width of a phone booth. He just made 2 people miss in a phone booth.
It's remarkable because there's no deceleration here. So there's no downshift.
Yeah.
It's all just one fluid succession.
Yeah.
But that's what I think too the NFL is moving towards at the running back position. Because if you think about a play like this, your bigger backs, your Derrick Henrys, even your Saquon Barkleys, who are great movers, super dynamic, physically cannot get in and out of these positions as quickly as your James Cooks, your Jahmyr Gibbs, your Christian McCaffreys, those type of movers.
Yeah.
Because they can get in and out of spaces in a very different, more difficult fashion. I was thinking about this today. I saw a clip of Derrick Henry, and I'm like, someone's like, hey, who could tackle Derrick Henry in his prime? Like, no, like, very few. But who's more, if you ask an NFL linebacker, who is more difficult to tackle? Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey or Jahmyr Gibbs or James Cook? The answer might surprise people because it's not just the sheer size of Derrick Henry. Yeah. Right? It's, oh man, I have to deal with Christian McCaffrey's feet.
Yep.
I have to deal with the reacceleration of Jahmyr Gibbs. Right? And so that's really the interesting mold of what's more difficult to deal with. And if you're like, if you watch the Tennessee Titans, if the run game isn't working with Derrick Henry, it ain't working. Like, you're not fixing it mid-game. Like, that's the issue. Like, they've keyed it. If we have a ton of the box on Henry at this stage in his career, it's going to be hard to get anything going, right? Your other guys, your Cooks, your Gibbs, your McCaffrey, Mara, you can put in there as well. Like, they can still produce in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting stuff. I mean, then when we talk about producers and moving the chain, so to speak, where do you have guys like, from a receiver standpoint, Malik Nabers, Marvin Harrison Jr., and their ability to produce in the NFL offense immediately?
Yeah. And that's what we're going to talk about next. It's a great segue into our next topic. And just before we get to it, I will just want to add that like the I love your point about Derrick Henry, and probably the only answer you'd say where you'd prefer not to take on Derrick Henry would be in the fourth quarter if he's getting over 15 to 18 touches and he's already pounded you into the ground,
Yeah.
and you don't want to, and you are now tired and beaten up and are making business decisions. But
Right.
you could also argue that any of the backs that we've talked about in the past 20 minutes are also players that in the fourth quarter you probably don't want to face either, because if they're on a roll, you're always guessing with them. With Derrick Henry,
Right.
you're not guessing. You're just praying that you can hit him low. You're praying you
Right.
don't have to take him on high,
Right.
and that you're not caught in a situation where you have to make a business decision or get hurt trying to tackle him. Um,
Right.
and I'll add this. I love the point about Barkley, because Barkley's a more agile version of an Adrian Peterson type of runner, in the sense
Sure.
of like back in the day, the thing that made Adrian Peterson great was that he was always jump cuts. Jump cuts or bust with him in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. But he was so violent with it. Is like you'd see him jump and plant his feet on the ground. And I think I had a joke on Twitter one day where I took a picture of a piece of land that had like the dirt was cracked from like the
Yeah, he's an earth mover, man. It's
yeah.
nuts.
And I
It's
would
crazy to watch.
yeah, I literally took a picture and said Adrian Peterson just jump cut here. Here's the crack in the earth to prove it, because it was to be able to plant so hard to do it, and he was doing it even in his later in his career with Detroit and was successful at times doing that. But that's that much energy put into cutting is no
Oh man.
longer as effective
Holy shit.
anymore in today's game. Now, the one back who is as big as Barkley, who has gotten away with it and been efficient, has been Nick Chubb. But his
Absolutely.
moving, but what he does that's so unique is he has a strange thing where I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. Um, where I've shown this, and actually this is one of those plays. He also did this play with the Eagles, and I show that as well. But here's a play where I remember seeing this and going, okay, this guy is probably special. Let's see if it'll just we'll run it all the way through, but you don't see it very well from this first angle, because it's broadcast view. But he's gonna hurdle a fallen body here, and then that defensive back who's waiting for him at the 5, he's gonna literally like bounce outside of that after leaping over a defender, and you can see he's in really tight quarters. And when I saw that, I was like, I need to see the red zone view of this, because how did he make that cut? That was the thing that really got to me. So let me see if I can find it. Here we go. So they show the play, and it's just essentially a toss. Gets downhill, and I think we get a chance to see it here. And if we don't, I can show you the Eagles play. But he's done this multiple times where he goes airborne and watches outside foot. It's literally turned to the boundary when he lands. Like, to be able to or pivots it as he lands. And the ability to just do that in such tight space was just
Yeah.
unique. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, super unfortunate injury with Chubb this year, but I mean,
Yeah.
how he prepares for the ground here is super important. Right? Like he doesn't prepare to like catch himself, right? He prepares to re-accelerate,
Yes.
which is, that's Nick Chubb to a T, because he's one of the best ever re-accelerating post contact.
Yeah.
So that makes, I mean, he's probably one of the most underappreciated players in the NFL, 100%.
Yeah. So just that kind of thing was fascinating to me as a point of discussion. But yeah, um, we can end this. But yeah, great career. I'd argue he's a Hall of Fame caliber talent. We'll see if he gets
Absolutely is.
an
9 day a
opportunity
week.
to be if he gets the opportunity from the media. But that's another story. So we're gonna stop sharing that. We're done with that. But yeah, your point about Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr. So the last time we convened, we kind of teased this idea that we were going to talk about them because we both discovered that we liked Malik Nabers and by kind of a healthy margin over Marvin Harrison Jr., though we both appreciate Marvin Harrison as a guy who could very well end up being one of the most productive, if not the most productive rookie in this class if he finds the right fit and continues to develop his game. And I think that's a stark difference from some people who you'll hear talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. as if he is already there. He's
Right.
the best wide receiver prospect in a long time, and people are going nuts about him. But you and I aren't alone. Chad Ryder, who I'm friendly with, who's at NFL.com, he hadn't seen us talk, but I asked him what he thought of. We were talking about receivers, and he mentioned Malik Nabers and gave glowing thoughts as well. And I said, "What do you think of Marvin Harrison Jr.?" He said, "Oh yeah, I like him." I said, "But I think Malik Nabers is
Right.
that guy. I think it's pretty
Right.
clear." And it's interesting that with that. So what is it? You can start in either direction you want to. What is it about one that people you feel like need to know versus the other, or just in terms of what do people need to know that they don't know about each of these guys?
I think with Malik Nabers, I think the difference right now in their games is Malik Nabers is NFL ready on all three levels of the field. Marvin Harrison Jr. is NFL ready, which is level three. That's the big difference. That's the contrast in those three. Now, I think a guy like Harrison Jr. has a higher ceiling. Don't think he's going to be better than a Malik Nabers until about like year three. But I think Malik Nabers can come into the NFL and be a 1,100 plus yard receiver
Yes.
and have 10 plus touchdowns. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a little bit more of a learning curve because if you look at two things he doesn't do well, he doesn't take contact overly well over the middle of the field. He doesn't protect himself well enough. And he's not as good after the catch as people think he is. So that's something that I think he's going to grow into. He's not the mover that Nabers is as well, which is, I think, going to limit his route tree initially.
Yeah.
He's very good vertically because you have a guy like him who's 6'3", 6'4", who is as fast as he is. He's going to be able to win on some of those, on some go balls, post routes, and so be that type of player. But I don't think he's going to be as initially impactful as the guy Nabers, who can be the engine of an NFL offense fairly quickly. And I think that's the difference. Is I think we're going to have to impatiently wait. I think for Marvin Harrison Jr. to be an elite receiver in the NFL, I think the Nabers is closer to that right now than Harrison Jr. is. I think both are going to be potential top 10 receivers in the league in the next 5 years. Yeah. I think both are incredibly good players. I just think there's this kind of aura around Harrison Jr. right now that I just don't understand as much. I think he's a very good prospect, but I don't think he's as good of a player as he is a prospect, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I think that's the big thing. I also think you can move Nabers around seamlessly. I think you can put Nabers in the backfield. You put him in the slot, put him out wide, put him at Z. Like, there's so many things you can do. I think a guy like Harrison Jr., I think until he proves he can win against win one-on-one against corners and number one corners in the NFL. He's gonna have a little bit of trouble. I think you want to move a guy like him in the slot a little bit initially, right? Get him used to the NFL game. But I think that's the biggest difference is I think right now it's just the diversity of Nabers' game. I think is much more refined.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like things that concern me about Harrison, and when I say concern, I'm saying concern me relative to the buzz people are giving. You know, but the things that he's going to have to learn to approach that buzz. When he plays outside, he opens his chest up too often to the defender as he's trying to work off the line and doesn't provide a move. Like he's not using footwork releases or different types of. He does use them, but he doesn't. There are situations where he doesn't use them. Just tries to outrun the guy, opens his chest, and gets pinned to the boundary, or can't overcome the contact that he's dealing with, even as physical as he is. And I watched this against Penn State last year, Michigan last year, Georgia at the end of the year. You know, there were issues like that. Then there's waiting until the latest window of possible arrival of the ball to make the catch. You know, whereas a guy like Chris Olave would kind of play with what window he could catch the ball at. Like sometimes he'd catch it at the earliest window. Sometimes he'd gauge the coverage and know that if he attempted the earliest window, he might draw the defender in and get hit earlier. But if he waited till the last window, the defender would probably pass under the ball and he could catch it. But Harrison seems to wait until the ball is into his body or at the highest point, not only above his head, but beyond his head, like behind him, to where instead of catching the ball at a high point with his overhand position, he'll go up and start to turn and try and make the catch an over-the-shoulder grab and let it go over him because he's either A, and I don't know his motivation, I can only estimate what it is. He's either A, trying to maximize the opportunity to get yards after the catch by turning downfield, or B, he's more comfortable catching the ball underhand, which leads to my next point because he is definitely more. He can catch overhand, but he likes to catch underhand. That's his default attack position, and so he'll often attack targets that he should be attacking with overhand position, with underhand position, allows the ball into his body or allows defenders to be able to break up the pass because now the ball's closer into his frame against tight coverage. And he ends up dropping passes that really you wouldn't expect a prospect of his skills to drop. So with that in mind, these are things that are obviously correctable. And then you could look at it and say, especially the underhand, you could say, are there players who catch underhand and have no problem with it, even though they're rampant with, maybe not using optimal attack? Well, Terry McLaurin is the big exception. I would say McLaurin is the best exception, and there are other guys who do it on occasion, but not rampantly as McLaurin does, and they're good. But guys who make it a habit, it's their reflexive habit, tend to struggle more often. The only other exception that I remember now, and I didn't evaluate him because it was before my time starting to study guys, but the best ever to do it was his dad. His dad, if you go watch his tape, which I went to do a couple weeks ago and just watched highlights, it was like almost every target I saw on like 20 minutes of highlights was literally him underhand trapping the ball to his chest and making amazing catches with great tracking. But it was like everything that you would say, don't do that. That's not what you. That's not what
you
you
don't
want
say
to
anything
teach.
that just keeps working.
Yes.
And that's his dad never dropped the ball. Like that's the thing is like he literally was notorious for not dropping passes.
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
And it was bad technique. I wouldn't say bad. it was suboptimal,
Yeah.
And so it was suboptimal, and most guys need optimal technique to play at the level Marvin Harrison Sr. did.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Because I think, yeah, you afford yourself a little leeway if you do anything to the 99th percentile, right?
Yeah.
You afford yourself that leeway, which Marvin Harrison Sr. Did. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's the difference between those two as prospects. I think as like pure athletes, pretty similar. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very unique linear athlete because of his speed,
Yeah.
how good of an accelerator he is. Obviously, he has an incredibly high ceiling like that. Don't want to get I guess the inkling that, oh my gosh, Marvin Jr. is not a good prospect. He's a very good prospect.
Yeah.
It's just he has, when you're talking about analyzing these guys, he has more glaring long-term needs than a Malik Nabers.
Yeah.
Where there's really right now, if you look at Malik Nabers, there's nothing that he can't do at a potential Pro Bowl, All-Pro level.
Yep.
And the things that you would say he cleaned up from last year to this year, right? Just it was more so just a consistency standpoint.
Yeah.
Going from inconsistent to consistent, and that's the thing too. Is he was the most consistent. He should have won Blitkoff, in my opinion. He was the most consistent receiver in college football.
Yeah. His ability, he has a massive vocabulary of footwork maneuvers and handwork maneuvers that he applies at a very savvy level for this stage. He is excellent at using pacing, not only with his footwork, but with his routes. So to your point about running backs and Lamar Jackson, this is a receiver who excels at pacing variation.
Yep.
And the best receivers tell stories well like that. Michael Crabtree was a terrific route runner for a while for his size because he understood how to use pace. And you see that with him. He understands how to set people up. To me, he's up there with guys like Odell Beckham Jr.,
for sure,
Justin Jefferson. Maybe he may not get that level of production, but the skill set that he has, it matches it pound for pound in terms of what he could potentially do year one.
100%. I 100% agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see what their pre-draft process looks like. And also, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. might go back to school.
Yeah.
This is an actual thing. And I think this is an interesting segue into the part we're going to talk about next time is how is the transfer portal and NIL going to impact roster evaluations in the NFL? Right? Some of these guys aren't going to be in NFL rosters when they're anticipated to be.
Yeah.
So imagine a big shakeup, like let's say Caleb Williams went back to USC.
Yeah.
Right? Or Marvin Harrison Jr. went back to Ohio State for the senior season. That would dramatically shift what some of these front offices are seeing at the end of their year. Yeah. You think you're in position to get a Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. caliber prospect, let's say, and they're going back to school. If that happens, I think it's really only going to take one blue chipper as a prospect to take the NIL, go back to school, and I think it's going to really start a chain reaction of guys who are going to continue to do this.
Yeah.
So what you're going to get is you're going to get prospects that are a year older.
Yeah.
So that's going to really misshape the evaluations of what the NFL is becoming as a prospect standpoint. And I think something that's interesting is someone brought up, well, what is the NCAA going to do to kind of combat this, right? Like, what are they going to do? Well, probably nothing because it makes them a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean,
right? They want the star. You want the star of your show to be the star of your show for as long as they can, right?
Yeah,
and that's a big deal. What the NFL might do to combat this is, all right, one and done. that might be the next domino to fall in the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, is you might see the NFL instituting the same rules as the NBA in terms of being one and done. I think that's a possibility if
Explain
players.
that to folks who don't watch NBA.
Sure. So basically, you can go to 1 year of college, or be 1 year removed from high school, I believe it is, and go straight to the NBA. So
Yeah,
I
that's true.
think that's going to be, so basically, let's say, who's a really good example? So let's say Marvin Harrison Jr. after his freshman season is like, see, I'm going. Can't do that right now.
Yeah.
But in 5, 10 years, that might actually come to fruition because the NFL wants to keep the owners happy and they want to combat the aging of prospects. The younger talent you have, the more time you have in the. So they might in turn say, all right, we're to combat the NIL by enforcing a one and done rule.
So what if so what if and I'm trying to look at this from an optimistic, maybe idealistic standpoint. What if this whole business that is college football um, actually drives the NFL to force them to develop players, to actually
I
develop.
think that is, if you look at it from a deeper player development lens, I think it's going to really force front offices to be a lot more intentional with their draft picks and not take as many darts,
Yeah.
right? And play it not based on traits, but based on what the player is now. Because you might not get, like, you can, if you look at the draft class the last 3 to 5 years, you could kind of year before guess who's going to be first rounders, right? At least I'd say half of the first round you could probably guess, right? But what happens if that half of the first round turns to only,
Yeah.
right? Then the game changes a bit because then you really have to hit on those guys. And also, too, one thing you're gonna have to do, I think, the backup quarterback's gonna become more important.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a super important one. I think
Yeah.
teams are gonna start to take
Multiple quarterbacks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as early as the second round,
And they're going to have
second to
to,
one.
and I think they're going to have to develop them. They're going to have to
Yeah,
find coaches who will in-house
yeah,
work with them on fundamental skills. And
yep,
they may have to spread that to other positions because
yep.
if I'm going to take a quarterback who's 19 years old, we haven't had success with that in the NFL. So, but if I'm going
Fair
to do
point.
that because I feel like he's too good of a prospect, then I'm going to take him and I'm probably going to take another one the year after that and another one the year after that.
Yeah,
And we're going to need to, and at first they're going to be stupid or foolish about it. And these guys are going to bomb one after the next. And
for
occasionally you're
sure.
going to get a one that works great and teams are
Right.
going to go the wrong direction. But the smart team's going to go, all these veterans have coaches. I'm going to hire one of these coaches and we're going to work on their development and we're going to try and get better at about actually doing what everyone likes to think they already do, which is coach them up. And we've already talked about how they don't coach up players. We've been talking about this for years. So they don't coach up players that way. You know more people and work with more people, and what you do goes a longer way towards coaching up players to get ready for the league than
Yeah, it's
because
it's
they're
really,
scheme
yeah,
oriented.
yeah, and it's really two pronged when we're talking about like developing athletes. And I'll be honest, a lot of pros don't want to be developed. They've been told their whole life
The
you know
best.
they're what doesn't stink,
Yep.
and they're the best. And a coach as well doesn't want to change philosophically based on the play, right?
Yep.
So it's really just, we're seeing this in Atlanta. It's personnel over scheme is not the case. It's scheme over personnel, and everybody is like, get Arthur Smith out of here because it's losing us games. Well, yeah, it's gonna bite you in the butt. You have a top 8 pick in Bijan Robinson, who is a rhythm runner who gets better with the more touches he gets, and you're giving him as many touches as Cordell Patterson and Tyler Gibbs. Coaching, right? And
Yeah.
just not just stubbornness. And so that's what happens with coaches too, is you get stubborn in terms of, well, my philosophy in terms of XYZ is going to be the same way because I'm a coach in the NFL. I deserve that. Player, same way.
Yep.
I'm a player in the NFL. I am the upper echelon of athleticism. I don't want you telling me what to do because I make more money than you do.
Yep.
Joe Smith, the quarterback coach.
Yep.
And so that's what happens a lot. So you see a lot more clash there. And good organizations are able to find players who believe the values of, I don't know everything. I'm a human being. I want to get better at my craft, and coaches that mirror that same sentiment. Right? So that's really successful locker rooms do that. Like the Lions are the biggest proponent of that. Right?
Yeah.
They are not as talented as some of those teams in the NFL, but they play an unselfish brand of football that works with those guys' personalities. Like think about the guys they have in the locker room.
Yeah.
Right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, Jared Goff, Sam Laporta's a great fit. Jahmyr Gibbs, listen to him speak. They're bringing in guys that fit that cultural mold. And every once in a while, they'll bring in guys like a Jameson Williams who doesn't fit that well, and then try to help kind of massage him along into that.
Yeah, because you have a strong enough locker room to see if it'll work. And that's the thing is like these. I'll give you two examples. Is like once Sam Laporta, I had a scout, a former scout and analytics consultant with a biomechanics and stats specialty in terms of like his higher education, who worked for about 30 teams during his career. Like he had direct lines to GMs, and he's been a long time RSP subscriber. And he said, he just wrote me like about a month ago, so you really nailed the Laporta evaluation. And I had to laugh because I wasn't extremely high on him because I thought he needed the perfect fit, and he found the perfect fit. But I love that you wrote on your floor scenario is that the coach and that the floor scenario for Laporta is that he winds up on the bench getting fattened up and put on special teams because the coach and the GM are in a pissing match over whether he should have been drafted or not. The coach wanting like an inline tight end who can really block, and the GM giving him a weapon, and the coach going, I need you to gain 20 pounds and I need you to block, and he winds up barely playing and not being very effective, and the coach going, see GM, I told you this guy wasn't good for our team. And he laughed. He goes, that happened. That's literally the RIP for so many NFL players that they get involved in that. And that's the point. And then when you talk about players not wanting to listen, I mean, Drew Lock is a great example, and he had such a good, story this on Monday night, and it was nice to see, you could tell he was so grateful for his opportunity to play again, and he's questioned it, and he may have had the near career death experience that Sigmund Bloom's talked about in the past that players can have due to this lack of maturity. And what the story I'm going to tell is that, when I evaluated Drew Lock, there were people talking about him in a Patrick Mahomes-esque skill set type of manner. And I was like, listen, this is like the difference between like a pop musician who plays an instrument and a jazz musician who plays an instrument, where, the more popular thing is the pop musician, but the level of skill sometimes that they have isn't as deep. It's still a great skill, but it may not be as deep as the guy who strictly plays. So when you watch Drew Lock, his game was much more surface level than Patrick Mahomes' game. And when watching Lock, it looked like, I mentioned that he looked like a player who was a top prospect in high school, and everyone was telling him that he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then he went to a mid-tier SEC school, and they were like, we need you because you're good enough to help us compete. But he he basically did what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it as a player, because you could tell that he just, he was undisciplined with his techniques and some of the things he did conceptually. And then when he had to play a top tier SEC team like an Alabama or a Georgia or an LSU, you could see him trying to do things the right way and him failing miserably, like stumbling over his feet, throwing bad balls, making mistakes, because he looked like the kid who was naturally gifted at math but now getting stretched, and ask him to do things that he actually had to practice, and he had no experience practicing. But in the SEC, these coaches they don't have another quarterback at Missouri to go, oh, well, we're going to bench him and put another one and make him work for it. They're just going to go, Drew, when you get to the pros, you're going to have to work on this, or this is something you should work on when you have time. But because it's not being enforced, and he's winning games against everybody but the top teams, even if he's not consciously thinking it, in the back of his mind, he's thinking, I can do this later. And then if someone asked him why, he'd think about it and go, well, because nobody really said anything about it. So then he gets to the pros, and apparently Peyton Manning, first phone call, at one of the early phone calls after the draft, said, if you need anything, if there's anything I can do for you, you let me know. And Drew Lock said thanks, ended the call, and that was that. Some other players, like if it was Tom Brady and that happened, to a player like that happened, Tom Brady probably would go, okay, do you have a garage that you can rent out? I will wash your cars. I will do chores, do whatever. If we can watch film every day and you can coach me, I want to be, I will I'll babysit your kids when there's time, whatever I need to do. You let me know.
Yes.
And Locke didn't do that. So then 3 years later, third year, they bring in Teddy Bridgewater. And Drew Lock's now competing with Teddy Bridgewater for his job and loses the summer gig. Fast forward to that point, my friend Cecil Lammey, you know Cecil probably from Football Guys. Cecil, covers the Broncos on air and goes and is part of media and goes to practices on a regular. He's talking to Drew Lock's dad, and they're talking, and he told me he told me during that summer, he said, yeah, Drew Lock, we were talking about him, and I asked him about the competition and how things going, and Drew's dad said, listen, I love my son. My son is a great kid. He's a caring human being, good human being, just all that. But I've been telling him since high school that the things coaches have told him he needs to work on, he should apply himself more. And he's never done it. And he finally got the message and called Peyton Manning back in year 3 when Teddy Bridgewater was brought in.
Yeah.
And it was too late. It was too late at that point for him, at least in Denver.
For sure.
And that's a common thing. You don't have to be a bad person. You just may not understand the gravity of the situation you're in, and you're allowing all these people to tell you you're great all the time. You don't realize you're great for where you are. You're not great for where you're going.
Yeah, it's being situationally naive, right?
Yeah.
So that's the funny thing to me. Look at it's funny because Geno Smith was kind of in Drew Lock's position.
Yes.
And now they're flipped. But I think that's the thing, though, is like I think that's going to happen with the Wilson too.
Oh yeah.
Is you can just get there a lot more in college, especially if you are at a school that needs you and like will kind of coddle you. Missouri might do, right? And that's what kind of happens is you don't learn as much because you're not being taught. You're being just pushed to keep doing what you're doing. It's great. We've never seen this shit before. It's awesome.
Yeah. In contrast, Tom Brady.
Yeah, at Michigan. Yeah.
When he talks about being the 6th or 8th guy, and he's not getting enough time in practice, and the coach is like, "Look, you could transfer and be a quarterback somewhere else, but if you're going to stay here, you better treat every snap like it's the Super Bowl."
100%.
Most kids would have just left, especially with
that's kind of the age we live in now. But it's really interesting. Looking at that and how guys develop differently. Like, is Drew Lock going to be a starter somewhere? I don't know, probably not. But he proved on Monday night that he can be a very solid long term backup,
Yes.
which is a freaking great career.
Yes.
And that's something, you kind of have to earn those stripes. Like guys like Gardner Minshew, right?
Yep.
Like Gardner Minshew is a freaking rock star in my mind. Like
Yep.
he can back up my quarterback any day of the week.
Yes.
Because he's someone I know can go in there, execute schematically, not make mistakes, just give me a chance to win.
Yeah.
And that is really what, from the ground level, what NFL offenses need, because there's a lot of bad quarterback play right now in the NFL, is just quarterbacks just give the defense a chance.
Yeah.
And just set you up for success in the fourth quarter. But yeah, that's some good stuff. Well, let's definitely next time talk about Drew Lock. Like talking about Drew Lock, Zach Wilson, kind of next steps for those guys and where they go. That's awesome stuff.
No, definitely, and we'll just tap it off with, I love the Minshew reference, because Minshew also knows exactly who he is. He has no illusions, I think, anymore about being
100%.
a starter. I don't think he had any illusions about really being a starter when he entered the league, but he was going to give it his best to do what he could. But I mean, this was a kid who thought he was going to be a coach. And now here he is. Yeah. He still has his same mattress, and he found they say he found on a dumpster and on campus. Now that's a little nutty, but that's you can hilarious. Tell he's holding on to every cent that he has, and knows that waterfall may stop, on any play. And I admire him for the radical steps he's taken to do that, knowing that this is generational money that he might have. So, yeah. With that, on that note, this is another great episode of Going Deep with Brandon Angelo. And, you can find him on X at Angelo_fantasy. Angelo's analysis, just great work. You can find me at MattWaldmanRSP.com. And we'll be seeing you in a couple weeks. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season. I guess we're going to see you probably after the new year. So early Happy New Year to everybody out there.
Yes, sir. Happy holidays.